It's hard to imagine a more spectacular place on Earth than British Columbia. But there is a looming danger. The proposed Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline through the vast mountain ranges of the interior and associated tanker traffic along the pristine BC coast threaten not only this vastly diverse, wild and sacred ecosystem. This big oil-backed project threatens the health, livelihood and future of tens of thousands of people who call British Columbia home. The proposed pipeline begins in neighboring Alberta, at the site of one of the largest, most polluting and destructive energy projects on Earth, the Alberta tar sands. Already, thousands of hectares of ancient boreal forest have been destroyed by Canadian and international oil companies. Thousands of tons of contaminated wastewater from Alberta's tar sands become a highly contaminated, toxic slurry spewed into massive tailings lakes that already stretch 130 square kilometers and leak 11 million liters into the once pollution-free Athabasca watershed every day. Downstream First Nations communities who consider these waterways their lifeblood are now suffering from increased cancer rates and other deadly diseases linked to tar sands operations. The highly profitable 1,170-kilometer proposed Northern Gateway pipeline would link Alberta's tar sands to Kitimat on the coast of northern British Columbia. A westbound pipeline would carry 525,000 barrels of heavy crude daily. At the same time, an eastbound line would transmit 193,000 barrels of condensate, a mixture of chemicals and petroleum used to thin the thick, tarry crude for transport. The oil from this pipeline would be sold to countries like South Korea and China to meet their growing demands for transportation fuels. Tar sands strip mining and drilling operations currently produce about 40 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. Experts warn that if this pipeline is built, tar sands oil production will increase by another 30%. Once the $5.5 billion pipeline enters British Columbia, those 700,000 barrels of petroleum products per day will cross or run parallel to more than 1,000 streams and rivers. Just one pipeline leak could jeopardize the Skeena and Upper Fraser watersheds, polluting drinking water and destroying or severely damaging two of the largest and highest quality wild salmon ecosystems in the world. The proposed Enbridge pipeline would cross the territories of more than 30 interior First Nations, many of whom have been fighting the Enbridge pipeline since the beginning.
What we're looking for our survival as Wet'suwet'en, and what the general public around us would be looking for is the same thing. And I think it's really important for us to think about our commonalities. We could lose this all. That's my greatest fear.
The pipeline would also threaten the extremely rare ecosystems of BC's pristine north coast, home of the Great Bear Rainforest, which, at nearly 8.5 million hectares, is part of the largest remaining coastal temperate rainforest in the world. The Great Bear Rainforest is rich in grizzly bear, wolf, and mountain goat habitat, as well as world-class spawning rivers and lakes for coho, sockeye, and Chinook salmon. Once the Enbridge pipeline reaches Kitimat, one of the world's most toxic carbon-intensive oils would then be loaded onto massive foreign-bound supertankers called very large crude carriers, nearly 1/4 of a mile in length and a capacity of more than 2 million barrels of oil. It's anticipated that approximately 225 condensate and crude oil tankers a year would attempt to navigate an extremely treacherous 240-kilometer route to and from the open ocean. A journey that includes Wright Sound, where the Queen of the North passenger ferry slammed into Gill Island in 2006 and is still leaking oil. The Pacific North Coast is hit regularly with cyclonic storms that generate enormous storm waves. The confluence of a jagged rocky coastline studded with reefs and rock piles, together with hurricane-force winds that generate massive waves, make the proposed tanker route one of the most dangerous shipping environments in the world. Left alone to thrive, our coastal waterways are among the richest in the world. They include the feeding habitat of humpback and killer whales, along with migratory salmon routes and at least 650 spawning rivers. A catastrophic oil spill along the coast, like the BP Deepwater Gusher in the Gulf of Mexico and the Exxon Valdez in Alaska, would devastate marine animal habitats with horrible consequences for local communities, fisheries, tourism, the environment, and our BC economy for decades.
People of British Columbia need to realize that they're being set up the same way we were set up in Alaska. These oil men come in like this, that there will be no risk to the people. They promise state-of-the-art vessel traffic control systems, state-of-the-art cleanup response, state-of-the-art pipeline construction. And what I hear Enbridge saying is pretty much exactly what Exxon said and what British Petroleum and what the other big oil company owners said. They don't care. It's all about money with them.
And unlike Exxon's disaster in Alaska, once the dirty tar sands oil leaves the Kitimat port, Enbridge Incorporated of Calgary has no legal obligation to clean up a spill. The people who live in British Columbia would be left with that daunting task and a massive bill, along with the heartbreaking consequences to an entire way of life. The proposed tanker route would pass through the territories of 10 coastal First Nations, all of whom have joined together to ban the tankers from their waters.
After 10,000 years, it's incomprehensible for many of us to stand by and allow a project like the Gateway project to proceed. We're prepared to take every action that's needed to ensure that this project doesn't go ahead, including standing in the line and going to jail, if that's what it takes.
If our environment is damaged, we fail to exist. And that's why you've seen such an upwelling of support from First Nations in the interior, the whole coast, all the way into Alberta. They know what this means. This really is the line drawn in the sand. We're not going to allow anybody to cross it, and then it just happens to be the one that's here today.
It's the amount of damage one of these things could do here. Like, it's probably one of the richest and most intact ecosystems in the world. I mean, as Canadians, we've got something here that can't be duplicated in other parts of the world. Do your job. I mean, vote. Be a Canadian.
Do we really want to risk unleashing an environmental, economic, and human rights catastrophe for the sake of Enbridge and big oil profits? Do we really want to encourage the expansion of Alberta's tar sands, Canada's fastest-growing source of greenhouse gas emissions? Before it's too late, please go to our website and join us in telling the federal government not to approve the Enbridge Northern Gateway Pipeline application. Urge the Prime Minister to implement a permanent tanker ban on the northern BC coast. Support First Nations title and rights to govern their territories. And call for federal energy projects that are consistent with a clean energy future. Together is the only way we will win this battle against Enbridge and big oil. And together, we can and will preserve our beautiful British Columbia for generations to come.